Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Machin Leira Online Smicha. There is a time of life that people don't like to talk about and definitely don't like to learn about it. And we hope and pray that Mashiach will come before that. But there's a time of end of life, which in Shulchan Aruch it's called the time of literally right before the Yetzias and the Neshama, and that's called Gosses. Why is it called Gosses? So it's brought in the Tosfos Yontif that Gosses is in Hebrew also means like to stir a pot. Is called a megis bigdeira, because that's the period of time in life that in the person's body things are moving around. The lecha, the moisture is in his throat, so that's why it's called gesisa. So we'll spend just a couple of minutes just discussing what Shulchan Aruch says, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do during that period of time, and of course, when to decide when the person's life is over, and what you're allowed to do. If you're allowed to pull a plug, that's not something that you could discuss on one foot here. That's something that you have to ask a shayla from a rav, a mumcha who deals with this. But lamashal, when exactly a time of death is in the geya for lamashal for a yard site. We know that we celebrate a yard site from the day of the time of the death, and not necessarily the day of the kavura. So if you want to know when it passed away, and to know when to celebrate the yard site, the upcoming years, you have to know when the Yetzias Neshama was. Now, what is the halachas or the menhagim that are brought about during the time of the Gesisa? So there is a Sefer Chassidim. The Sefer Chassidim has brought a very fascinating thing. In Siman Tavshim Mem Beis, he says, how important is it that there should be people around their b'shas Yetzias Neshama? So the Sefer Chassidim in Siman Tavshin Mem Beis writes, Misha Yoshev Lefnei Chaylev, somebody sitting in front of a sick person while he's in the last moments of his life, and there's nobody else there to be there when his neshama will depart and help him out, and to help him, and even if it's time to daven, Lo yetze misham. Don't go out. Don't leave the room to daven, because it's a very important to be. Somebody should be there. And in Broughton Stay Chemed, he says that the people who are there b'shas Yetzias Neshama should make sure not to talk nonsense, just to be involved in Talmud Torah and Divrei Kedusha. And if you're able to try to have a minyan b'shas the Gesisa, would be a very great thing. So as mentioned, it says in Svarim that it's brought in Shulchan Aruch and Yeridei Siman Shin Lamed Tes Sif Daled. It's best that when the neshama departs, it's not there alone, and there's somebody there. And as mentioned before, and even better if there is a minyan. It says that you're not supposed to move the body at the last moments. So one of the things that it's mentioned to do is that wherever the body is laying, wherever the person's laying, you try to put borders around the bed, because by tzaddikim it says, the reference when they die, it says asifa. They were collected. They were put together. So you don't want any body part hanging over the bed. So what some do is when they're in the last matziv, they put chairs around the bed, because during the time of the Gesisa, you're not allowed to cause the time of death to go early, so you're not allowed to touch the body. So just make sure that no hand or foot goes off the bed. And if you didn't put the chair, then you're not allowed to move around any of the body parts. It is also brought that the people standing around there should not cry, and they should, especially the children, should not cry, because this is the side of the minig, that the father benches the children before he departs, to give them the opportunity of the Olam Hazeh Gashmi and the Maisa mitzvahs, and the son is able to fulfill that, and that's why you do it in a happy you do it in a happy way. Those who feel that they can't and they're going to cry, you ask them to go into another room. The custom is also that while it's this time, it's end of time, you light a lot of candles, but don't put it very close to him, and not to frighten him, but you light candles. It is also brought that you open the windows. Now, if the chayla asks for a drink of water or asks for something, a medication, whatever, you're allowed to give it to him, as long as you give it to him from, you're allowed to give it to him. What aren't you allowed to do b'shas de gesisa? A kohen, for example, is not allowed to go into a room while there's a person who's gosesing, unless he's one of the krovim where a kohen is allowed to become tamei to. Before the Yetzias Neshama, you're not allowed to do anything which is shayich to the P'tira, like Kriya or Hesped or preparing the Aron. As long as he's alive, he's alive. You're not allowed to do anything to hasten the death. You're not allowed to touch him. You're not allowed to close his mouth. You're not allowed to do anything. The people standing around the bed, it's best they don't stand leragle hamita. Don't stand by the feet of the bed. You stand the side and the top. As I mentioned, the Sefer Chassidim says that it's very important people to be there. Now, if once it's mamish, it's over. Now, the best way to verify the time of death is when the doctors sign off the death certificate. Then it's official. Now, when that happens, if there's nobody there right there, the doctor's in, you could test it by putting a tissue over his nose, and if you see that the tissue is not moving, then you could assume, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and Siman Kuf Tzadik Dalet Sif Hey says, you could assume that it has passed. When the person has passed away, you cover his or her face with a white sheet, and you open the windows. You're not allowed to kiss the person who passed away. All the halachas of Kriya, again, many people have different customs, so we'll leave it for another time. If the person passes away in a house, the halacha says you pour out all the water you're able to drink has to be poured out, but not water that was cooked or congealed or mixed into anything else or tightly sealed doesn't have to be poured out. And not only the place where the mez dies, you pour out the water. 3 neighbors around also do so, and this is a halacha about pouring out the water around the mess. It's preferable only those who went to the mikveh should deal with the mess. It is brought that you ask mechila, forgiveness from the nifter and the nifteres, by saying the name and their father's name, and they say that we did everything possible to honor you as much as we could. When the person passes away, you make sure you straighten out the hands and feet, you close the mouth. And then of course a lot of extra halachas if there was any machinery attached. What do you do with the machinery? How do you take it in and out? And what do you do with the blood? There's only division in them. After all that, in Darkei Chesed Amar Reish Samach Beis, he brings that you take the body and put it on the ground. It's called afhaiben, which is really the opposite. You're putting on the ground on top of some straw, and you put the nifter or the nifteres facing the door, and you say different psukim, as in the Sidurim or in the textbooks. You'll find which Sidurim you say. Again, when you put the nifter on the ground, you ask mechila, and there's a certain text that people say. It's brought in the Sefer Mai V'Yavik, Maimer Aleph. Anyways, we should be zoicha to Umacha Hashem Dimam Al Kapanim, and it's only be Vakitzi Varan Nushaychni Offer.